So today I want to talk about how to get more people to play your indie game at a game convention. So on the weekend I went to the Toronto Games Expo, and as I walked by each booth, I noticed that the small indie game booths were not getting any attention, right? So it was either, the game dev standing around, waiting, looking around eagerly, or they were sitting down playing their game just to pass the time. And it wasn't because the games were bad, there's something else going on. So you see, as a player, as an attendee, if I have to overcome any friction to, play your game, I'm just going to keep on walking, right? So let me share with you 7 frictions or tips that I noticed that small indie game devs were kind of guilty of, right? And I'll show you how you can, avoid these frictions so that when you go to your next game conference, it's very easy for me as an attendee, as a player, to jump in and start playing the game without, thinking, without, any trouble. Okay, so here's friction number 1, and that is your entry point. So you got to tell me where to sit. You got to tell me where to stand. You got to show me exactly which laptop or console I can play, because if I don't know a simple thing like which laptop I can use to play your game, then I'm going to, I'm gone. I'm going to go on to the next booth. And I say this because it might seem obvious to you, the person setting up the booth, which laptop is for playing the demo, right? And then it's obvious to you, where to sit or stand, right? But as a player, as an attendee, there's so much foot traffic. There's so much people, just standing around kind of in the way. It's really confusing for me to know which, where I can just jump in and start playing the game, right? Again, it's obvious to you, but as the person on the outside, it's really hard to distinguish which laptop or console to jump in. And then any of that little friction is going to stop me, it's going to pause me, and I'm just going to move on. So think about it this way. When you go through a fast food drive-through, there are simple signs and arrows telling you exactly where to go, right? Drive here, stop, order here, pay here, then drive here, and then pick up your order. And then even when you're leaving, it tells you exactly where to leave, right? Because everything is laid out, so there is no friction and there's no confusion. Again, it seems obvious, it seems simple, and you might think that people might know what to do, but don't underestimate how easily a person can get confused, and especially during, a Games Con where there's so much foot traffic and there's so much people just standing around. It's very confusing for me to know what I can do and what I can't do, right? So even having a simple sign over, laptop or your console saying, welcome, play here, will cut through all that confusion. Or even having some simple arrows pointing to, the laptop. Again, this sounds so obvious that you don't do it because it's obvious, here's the laptop, play right here. But as a player, again, it's really confusing to know which one to jump in. And any friction, I'm out, right? The reason why this simple signage, arrows or, any kind of sign works is because through the crowd, I can easily read play here. And then I check if the spot's open and then I jump in, right? But if I have to scan the area to see, where can I sit? Where can I stand? Where can I play? All that, extra, mental work, especially on a, Games Con, I'm just out because I just want to keep, looking at new stuff. I want to keep going. I don't want to stop and think. Because what happens is if there's no clear directions telling me what to do or where to stand and where to play, I have to, then go find the dev and then ask them. Or if there's a person in front of me, I'm asking, are you in line? Or are you the dev, right? And then I have to worry about if I can just jump in and start playing. Like, I don't know the rules, right? Again, it seems obvious, but as a player, as an attendee, this is not obvious. Also, I noticed that, bigger indie game devs who had more attention physically stood out. So what I mean is they were often better dressed than the attendees, right? And in an instant, I can tell who the dev was and who wasn't, right? The thing is, being well dressed is important because it establishes, competence. And in 1 second, I know who the dev was, and it makes it easy for me, to approach them. But if the dev blends in with the crowd, then I have to put in more effort to find out who's the dev, right? And I'm not saying you need to, wear something very formal or something uncomfortable that you don't normally wear, right? Even if you wear, hoodies, at least make yourself stand out in some way. Wear a name tag or a badge or, a lanyard, right? With your game's logo on it, something that makes you, stick out that you're the dev, right? So my whole point is if I feel uncertain in any way, I'm gone. So take out any uncertainty as you can. That way that player can easily, jump in and start playing. So no thinking, no wondering where, to sit or stand or what controller or, mouse to use, and no wondering where the game dev is. So use signs, use arrows, name tags, lanyards to remove all that uncertainty, right? Okay, next. So friction number 2 is your booth isn't your office desk. So to be honest, the small indie game devs were, a disorganized mess. Cables were everywhere, old lunch boxes, and food, was sitting around. Game controllers or mouses were here and there. And I had no idea where to sit, where to stand, or what controller to grab, or what laptop or mouse to use, right? So to get rid of any confusion, keep your booth clean and keep it very simple, right? Your booth should only have 3 things, right? It should have your sign, it should have your laptop or your console, and, a stack of business cards. And again, this might seem obvious, but I was very surprised to see how most indie game dev booths looked like, shit. And I mean, I get it. It's a long day. You don't have a lot of space. You got to eat, right? You got to, put cables and equipment somewhere, right? Fine. But make sure to keep the designated area where, the player can play, clean. The reason this is important is because clutter is not inviting, right? Clutter adds confusion. But having an area clean and organized makes, easy for me as a player to jump in and start playing, right? And if you notice, the bigger booths, the bigger indie game devs, you can tell the professionalism because it is a cleaner area. Okay, friction number 3 is I can't read your sign because it's below eye levels. So tall signs, right? Get a tall sign because people won't read your sign if it's at desk level or, at the booth level, right? Of course, you got to follow, the organizer's rules on how to set up your table, but at least make sure your sign is above level. Because when I'm walking through the crowd, I'm not going to tiptoe over the crowd to see your sign, right? If it's at, at desk level, it needs to be higher than the crowd itself. And so I can read it and grabs my attention, right? Also, your sign needs to use, bright colors, saturated colors, and use contrast. So what I mean is, even a black background with bold letters, right? And that's because you don't want your sign to blend in with the background, right? With the conference floor. There's so much going on. There's so much lights. There's a lot of stuff trying to get your attention. You want to have a sign that kind of stands out from, that doesn't blend in with the crowd. Also, another thing is don't just display your logo, right? Sometimes logos are hard to read. On your sign, make sure that you also add a tagline that describes your game. So something even simple like, your indie game name here. So basically your logo and then your tagline saying, a roguelike story-rich adventure game. Something simple that I can tell in 3 seconds what the game is. Because remember, everything on the conference floor is fighting for attention, right? Everybody is trying to get those attendees' attention, right? And if I'm walking by your booth or your table and your sign is at, desk level, I'm not going to, make an effort to, go through the crowd and try to spot it, right? I want to walk by, I want to see your sign, and then boom, there it is, right? And the reason why this is important is because your first job is to get my attention. So if your sign blends in with the background, then you lost my attention. And if I have to fight to find your sign, or I don't know what's going on in that table, you've lost my attention. And then also, if your sign does happen to grab my attention, then a logo isn't enough, right? Like I said, some logos are really hard to read and I don't know what's going on. I want to know more, right? So to pull me in, use a tagline or something simple that, describes your game, your genre or something, right? Just something simple that in 3 seconds I know what your game is. And by the way, if your game is launching in a few months and you want me to, increase your wish list for you, then click the link below to learn how much it costs and what you get. Okay, here's friction number 4. I'm not your beta tester. So I know, I get it. Watching a person play your game right in front of you is probably the most valuable thing you can get, when you have a table or at a conference, right? And sure, take notes, engage, ask questions. But man, I'm here to play games. I'm here to see what else is going on. I want to have fun. I don't want to feel like I'm working, right? And there is a time and place, to beta test your game. In fact, you probably get a better return on your investment if you put up a flyer at your local college or university and you gave an incentive like, $20 for an hour to play this game, right? So you get 20 people and that's like $400 plus extra for space and rental and equipment, right? So maybe for like $600, $700, you can get 20 hours of data instead of going to a conference where, there's a lot more going on than just, beta testing, right? Because again, at a games con, I'm there for me, right? I'm there to be entertained. I'm there to check out all the stuff that's happening on the floor. And I'm not here to feel like I'm in some lab with a game dev looking over my shoulder, judging me how I play the game, right? I'm here for me. And if I feel like it's mostly for you, then I have other things to check out, right? There's so much, again, fighting for my attention that if I feel any friction, I'm out. And again, don't get me wrong. It's fine to, take notes and ask questions, but always put the attendees, needs first. Your goal should be that the attendee, that person playing your game has a fun, memorable moment so that they remember you when they leave, right? And they wish list your game after they, check out your game. All right, let's move on to friction number 5. And that is your demo is too long and too hard, man. So it was very obvious some game devs weren't ready. It seemed like they, whipped up a demo, bought space floor and they hoped for the best. And I'm not saying they didn't put in any effort, right? Everybody I met was, very passionate. They were very hardworking. They were taking a lot of risks and they were giving their best, right? But even still, having a polished, tight demo before going to a conference is very important because if you want a player to have fun and wish list your game, you can't, make it too hard. You can't make it too long. So for example, some demos I played were, way too long. A demo shouldn't be 30 minutes, right? It should be a polished 5-minute to 10-minute, experience, especially at a game conference where there's so much to see and do, right? I just want to hop in and go to the next one, right? And honestly, some demos were really hard, right? And if you're making a difficult game or, a very dense game with a lot of complicated mechanics, that's fine, right? But for me, as the player, as an attendee, it's awkward and not fun, spending more than 10 minutes trying to figure out a hard puzzle, right? At home, sure, I'll focus, I'll have the patience, but on the show floor, on the, conference floor, I'm here for a fast, fun experience, right? Plus, I have a lot of other cool stuff I want to check out, right? And not just sit there trying to figure out the game. And I'm not saying you need to dumb down your game or change anything, right? Keep your vision, keep how your game is supposed to be, right? But what I'm saying is before going to a game con, make a tight demo, get feedback, polish it. And again, don't use the floor to beta test your game or your demo. That's not a good, return on investment, right? You want to be 100% ready with your demo before you go to the conference. And again, even if your game is complicated or hard or dense, your demo needs to be, a self-contained experience that, can fit into 5 or 10 minutes, right? So what I mean is, in 5 to 10 minutes, I should experience the best part of your game, and I want to leave wanting more, right? And I don't want to play a tutorial level. I hate, playing tutorials when I'm even at home, right? And it's even worse in a games conference because there's, again, so much to see and to do, right? I don't want to sit there trying to figure out a tutorial. And I know this is easier said than done, but you got to remember, you need to test your demo and get feedback before going into the conference because you'll get a better ROI when you do that. Okay, here's friction number 6. I'm going to forget about you the moment I leave your booth. So make sure that with every interaction you have to give out your business card, right? And make sure your business card has a QR code that, goes to your Steam page or your itch.io page, right? And when you give me your card, tell me exactly what to do and when. So for example, I'm done playing your game and I'm about to leave. You hand me your card and this is what you say. Thanks for playing the demo. Here's my card. When you get home, scan the QR code and download the demo. And don't forget to wishlist the game. Thanks. Again, this is very important because, like I said before, people need clear directions on what to do. Don't assume they'll do it. What's obvious to you isn't obvious to them or to me, right? This is why YouTubers always tell you to, subscribe and like the video. So please subscribe and like this video, right? And that's because people are lazy, right? So don't assume a player is going to remember you and your game and then go home and search you up on Steam. They're not going to do that. And don't assume they're going to go grab your business card that's sitting on your desk. Don't assume that they'll scan that QR code and download your demo when they get home. So it's very important that you grab your card from your desk, right? And hand it over to the player and tell them what to do when they get home. Okay, last one. And friction number 7 is the conference itself, right? It's funny because they call it the Toronto Game Expo, right? But it was mostly Artist Alley. Most of the exhibitions were artists, right? Or, people selling, old Nintendo games. Also, I saw a lot more, people wearing Star Wars stuff than I did anything video game related. Because you see, most people going to a games con are not there to play small indie games. In fact, the indie game tables had the least floor space at the, Toronto Games Expo, right? That's because what sells tickets isn't indie games, right? So my point is, as a small indie game dev, you need to clearly define your goals when you spend time and money going to a games conference, right? So is your goal try to get exposure? Is it, more wish list? Is it, watching people play your game in front of you so you can, improve your game? Is it, networking? Is it, marketing your game? I'm asking you this because if all you want to do is network and meet people, then you'd probably get a better ROI going to an indie game community event, an event that, only focuses on indie games and not other distractions like Artist Alley or YouTube celebrities or other gimmicks that, sell tickets. And if you want more wish lists, then maybe, spending that money on, Facebook or Reddit ads would be a better return on investment. Or, take that money and sponsor a small YouTuber, right? Or like I said before, if you want to see people play your game so you can improve your game or your demo, then take that money, and set up your own beta test. And I'm not saying don't go to, big game conferences. There's a lot of intangible results that you can get from, these conferences. But if you need tangible results, like, you need to get 10,000 wish lists or a certain number of sales, then other strategies would probably work better. You probably get a better return on investment. And don't get me wrong, when your studio grows and you have a big audience and you have a huge, fan base, then yes, 100% go to these conferences because your fans would love to meet you in person and play your game, right? But right now, when you're small and you have no audience, just know that going to a games conference won't bring you, tangible results like 10,000 wish lists. It might not even give you 100, right? And I mean, that's okay. Sometimes intangible results like having fun, getting out there, meeting people, even finding new fans is worth the energy, worth the time and money. But weigh your options because maybe a different strategy would work better right now instead of, going to a games con. Again, my goal is to help you increase your wish list, and sell more game copies. So hopefully you got at least one good idea or insight to help you improve your, your table if you do decide to go to a games con. And again, if you need help and you want me to increase your wish list before your game launches, then click the link in the description below. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. My name is Darius, and I'll see you in the next video. Later.